All right, hey team, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is part 2 of building a plugin. We're building a drop-down element. If you haven't watched part 1, I highly recommend going back, watch part 1 before continuing any further here. It's gonna everything in part 2 will make a lot more sense. We go over really the editor and the sections of the editor and how to set up and think about the plugin that you're going to build. So there'll be a link here. You can just go watch that, then definitely come back, watch part 2. But just to recap what we've done, we've built an element. We have it right here in our Bubble editor, and we've defined the inputs, the data that we need to take into the plugin. We've defined events and the state that we're going to expose in the editor so that the developer has access to, so like the selected state and actually triggering an event when a selection is made. But that's about as far as we got. So we're going to go ahead and dig in. We're going to get into the weeds a little bit today. It's probably going to be a little bit heavier of a tutorial simply because we've got to dive into some code, right? And I'm just going to tell you up front, I'm not a coder. I don't have a background in coding. I learned JavaScript in order to be able to build Bubble plugins for myself and for the community. So I've learned a lot over the last several years with JavaScript, and I highly recommend. I'm not going to get into JavaScript except where we need to today, and we will have to get into it some. But if you want to learn JavaScript, there's lots of great tutorials on YouTube. So I highly recommend go out and do that. We're not going to go there today, but we will go as deep into the code as we need to explain what we're doing. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. So we've decided, by we I mean me, because I was this is initially a plugin, just an element I needed for myself. Needed a drop-down plugin that has search functionality, and so have selected this SlimSelect library, and this is what the element looks like. You have a little search box, and then you can select your options. So, and just to jump in, so what is a JavaScript library, right? You hear that a lot. I remember being confused by it, but it's just a simple concept. All it is snippets of code that have been pre-created, right, that we can take advantage of. So in this case, there's code that we can pull into our plugin, right, and then we can use it to build out this functionality. This functionality has already been built in that library, and we just have to take advantage of what's been built and customize it to use in our own scenario. So hopefully that makes more sense as we get in to the process. But so this is the library we're going to use. We're going to come right back to this in a little bit, but the first thing we need to do is we're going to go back into our plugin editor, and we're going to start off here on our element. We've got 1T drop down, and we stopped right here with actions last time. So first place we're going to start is this headers input. So headers, and let me just show you. In fact, we just go here into the SlimSelect page, and if you right click in Chrome, there's this inspect option. So if you click inspect, this is going to give you the dev console, and this allows you to look into the page and see the HTML elements, see exactly how the page is put together, see the code that's being loaded, and then just tons of stuff. It's super useful. But for now, we're just going to show you what this header input here, and when we're talking about HTML headers, what that means. So on an HTML page, you have two sections. You have the head and you have the body. And so if we look right here, so we right clicked, this is our HTML page, right? So we have our head and we have our body. Now the body is going to contain all the content that's being displayed on your page. So if we open this up and we start going through here, so let's just open there's the div, so we can see as we scroll over, you can see the part of the page that's being impacted. So that's the body. The head is a container, and it's loaded first, and so this is where a lot of the background stuff happens, right? So if you need to load in any kind of script, you need to load in styling code like a CSS file, anything like that is going to go in this head. And so we talk about an HTML header, right? This is what we're talking about. And anything that we put here in this header input, when that plugin element is on the page, will be inserted into this part of the page on that bubble page, right? And so what we're going to use this for, and you can see here, so we have links. This is all CSS, styling. Let's see there, and then you can see we're starting to load some JavaScript, that .js, and so you can see what's happening here. I'm gonna go ahead and close that out, but that's where those elements end up. And so if we look in here, we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna start with installation, right? So anytime you use a library, you have to bring that code into your plugin. So if we open up installation here, SlimSelect, actually, they make this really handy. Sometimes it's kind of difficult to find the script and the link to actually include it in the plugin, but they have it set right here. We're going to do the CDN, and we're just going to copy this code. Actually, they got a copy button right here. Let's just click copy, and then we're going to go back into our bubble editor and just hit paste. All right, so what we have here, the first line is a script. So this is going to load the SlimSelect.min.js. The .min just simply means it's a minified code. So it's the one you want to use when you're looking, because oftentimes you'll have an option of in this scenario be like, SlimSelect.js, which would be the code with lots of comments and kind of saying what each piece of the code is doing. The .min is going to be minified, and all the extraneous comments and spacing and all that would be stripped out. It's the lightest code that you can load. That's normally the one you're going to want to include. So we have the script. We're loading that first, and then this link here is loading the CSS that will be formatting our dropdown. So let's actually pull this. I'm going to preview this page just to show you. So let's go ahead and inspect. And if we go in here, let's see if we can find it quickly. Might have gotten myself into something. You can see bubble loads quite a lot of stuff. But right here, okay, so if we'll just pull this out, and you can see right here at the bottom we have that script tag with the SlimSelect.min and the link tag with the SlimSelect.min CSS, right? So that's exactly what we just added into this input here. Okay, let's move on. The reason we include that is so that we have access to that code. Without it, we can't use it. By adding in the header, it'll load on the page. We can use it in our plugin. The next section here is 3 different functions that are available on our element. And a function is it's just simply an action that runs, right? So we have an initialize function right here. This will load on page load, or excuse me, as soon as the element's visible on the page. This will run. It runs one time per page load, and that's it. So this is really where you want to put as much of the static code that you can use. It's going to load. It's going to load quickest. It's going to load first, and then it doesn't update. So if you want to like draw an element on the page, like this is, if you can do it in the initialize, that's where you want to do it. Simply because it's one and done, and it's done quickly. The function, the update function, this will run anytime any changes are made to any of the values in our fields. So if you remember, we have these fields, so placeholder, data type, list of options, default, and then display field, right? So anytime anything changes in those fields, the update function will run. For instance, so we have app type, that's going to be set. That will never change on the page load. The placeholder, we do have it set as the dynamic value. It could change. List of options could change, so that's our data source, right? That's all our options. So say we're showing a list of users. If a new user is added, then that list is updated, right? So now instead of having 3 users, we have 4 users. That list updates is going to run the update function. So we have the default dynamic value, or the default option, which is a dynamic value. It could change. We'll get into that when we're doing our kind of wrap up and testing and bug fixing and making sure that this plugin is ready for prime time. But your dynamic value can change, right? And let's see. So then we have fields of data type. That's not going to change. So both the app type and the fields of data type, that's not going to change. But any of these other 3 values, the placeholder, your list of options, and your default option, can change. And anytime any kind of change happens there, it's going to rerun your update function. All right, we're going to come back to that. And then we have this preview function. And this is simply where you put the code to configure how the element looks in the bubble editor. So you can see it says no plugin preview available. We haven't added anything to it. But you can change how this plugin preview looks, and you would do that here in this preview function. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into actually building out this element as we need it. And just before we get started, so this plugin element as it is a div on the page, but it has nothing in it. So we have to build everything inside it. So it's essentially in bubble speak, it's just like a group on the page, right? I've added a group here. There's nothing inside it. For us to create what we want, we're gonna, we would, drag buttons in here, right? And maybe a text element, etc. We would build out this. This element how we want it to be. It's exactly the same with a plugin. This plugin element, it's a blank div. We have to add everything that we want to it. So let me just delete this group out, and we're going to go through this step by step. So first thing that you want to do when you're building an element plugin is you want to give it an HTML ID. So generally, this means you're going to create an HTML ID that's random enough to be unique on page load, and you're going to add it to the actual plugin element. So if we go have a preview set up here, and we'll just refresh, and here in our developer tools, if we hit this little arrow with the square around it, it'll let us just select the element we want to inspect. And so we can see here there's a bunch of classes that Bubble puts on it, but there is no ID. So we have the ability to add an ID directly to this div that is the plugin container element. It's essentially. So to do that, and I just have some standard code here that I use to create my IDs. It works perfectly fine. I think I stole it off of the internet somewhere. But essentially, it's just a function that creates a random string or text, and then this we just set a variable here of ID, and I normally prepend it, so it's possible what comes back from this function starts with a number. So I normally just prepend it with something that makes sense with with the plugin. So in this case, I added slim, so it's slim, and then we're concatenating that, which means we're just adding the actual unique ID on the end of that. So, and just to show you what this looks like, we're going to console log, and all the console log is that when this loads here in this console tab, if we console log something, it simply means we're going to print it, and it's going to get printed right here in this panel. So let's just do a console log, and I'm going to say HTML ID, and then we'll concatenate that with the actual ID value. And now if we refresh the screen, all right, boom. So here we go. We can see HTML ID, and then this is the ID that we're creating. Okay, that doesn't do us any good yet, because if we look at this element, we can see that there's still no ID on there. So if we want to put that ID directly onto the plugin element, we're going to append it to the canvas. So we have access to this div via this variable instance that Bubble makes available to us. And just to kind of inspect that, you can look at show documentation, and it will give you a full layout of the variables available in each one of these functions. So instance is available on all the functions, and it's essentially this instance of the plugin element, right? So if you have multiple elements on the same page, each one will have its own instance object. So it's going to be unique to the element that is being displayed. And so we have instance, and then on this instance object we have canvas, which is this div of the plugin element. We have publish state. This is a function that allows us to publish values to the states. Remember the states that we set up in the first part of this series. That's what we use to actually set those values. We have trigger event. That is what we use to trigger specific events on the plugin. And then we have data, which is essentially a freeform object that allows us to pass data back and forth between these functions and store values in that object. So we're going to be using both canvas and data up front. Initially for this, to set this ID, we're going to use the canvas. So we're actually going to go with some jQuery here, and we're just going to say instance.canvas. So we're simply targeting this element, and then we're going to say attribute, and we're going to set the ID, and then that ID is going to be this variable. So if we refresh again now here on the front end, we're going to select the plugin element, and if we look in here, we can now see there's an ID attribute, and it's that same ID that we've printed out here, right? So now we have a way of targeting this element using a unique HTML ID. Now, however, in this particular scenario, SlimSelect actually gets mounted directly into a drop-down element, right? So if we, let me just see here. So you can see, so this is how we're going to initialize the SlimSelect object, or the SlimSelect element. And here where it says select, we have the ability to set in an HTML ID that needs to reference a select element, select HTML element. So the select HTML element is the dropdown. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to actually, we're going to pull this out, and I'm just going to grab another snippet of code here that I have pre-configured so that I'm not making too many mistakes on this video. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to take that instance.canvas, which is the element, and we're going to append some HTML to it. And the HTML we're going to append to it is going to be a select element. We're going to add the ID actually directly to that element so that we can target it when initializing the SlimSelect functionality. We're also going to give it a class of Slim dropdown in case we want to set some CSS there, and that's going to be it. So let's just preview this one more time, and you're actually going to see what looks like the makings of a dropdown here on the page now. Okay, so you can see here we have, essentially a tiny little dropdown. And this is the native HTML select element. We're going to go ahead and target it again. And now we can look in our plugin element, and we can see we no longer have that ID on the element, but we have this select element that's been appended to it, and the ID is now there on this select element. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. We're going to keep moving on without getting too far into the weeds here. And see, I'm going to go ahead and pull this console log out. All that is working properly, and we're basically to the point now where we're ready to actually initialize the SlimSelect element. So we're going to go ahead and grab this little snippet of code, and we're going to come back over here, and we're going to initialize it, but we're also going to remember the data object that I was talking about. We're going to set a value on that so that we can use that same value in our update function. So we're going to say instance.data, and then I'm just going to call it select, right? That makes sense with what we're doing. And then equals, and then let's make that a little nicer. So new SlimSelect, and then this needs to reference this ID that we're setting. So what we're going to do is we'll do these little backticks, and so these are in the top left, and allows us to use to put the variable directly in line here. So let's just clear that out, and we're going to say the pound key and then ID. So we'll do like that. So what's happening here is we're using this SlimSelect library now, and we're creating a new instance of this SlimSelect element, and we're telling SlimSelect that it needs to be built on this element that we've already added to the plugin. So that's how we're using this ID currently. So let's go ahead and refresh, and we should see a completely different element now here on the front. Okay, so we can see now we have the basic makings of this SlimSelect dropdown. So if we go back to the home, right here we can see what it looks like. We have essentially that right here. We have the search box, we have the appearance, the formatting is there, but we don't have any options in there that we can select yet. So let's go ahead, let's build out those options. Now, the reason I added this to an instance.data property is because the first thing I want to do here in the update function is I want to put that element that we just created in the initialize function, I want to put it into a variable in the update function so that I can access it. Because as we start looking through this library, we're going to see we have options that we can set, and then we have these methods that we can call that we're going to have to actually use to set our data and everything. And so to be able to do that, we need access to that element. So first thing we're going to do is we'll just say let's select equal, and then this would just be instance.data.select. All right. So you can see this, it's the exact same thing as we've set it to. It's just simply now in this function, we're saying, okay, get the data that we set on that instance.data, and let's just put it in this select variable because it'll be easier to use like that. Okay. Now we have to pull in the data that we want to use and set as our options. And the first thing we want to do, and in fact, I'm going to pull that down, and let's just the first thing you want to do when you're pulling in data like this is you want to load the data first. So we have one field here that we're going to work with first off. It's a list of options, and it's going to be the list of the options that we want. So we're passing, let me just look and make sure. So we're passing characters. Characters are a data type that I have, and it has one field which is display, and that's just the name of the character. So, and then the characters are just kind of some random names that I've pulled out. So we're going to use this field, and we need to pull all that data into our function so that we can then access it. Now we have a show documentation link here as well on the update function. And if we click on there, because we can see, so in initialize, we have instance and context as variables. And then here in update, we have a third one that's called properties. Properties gives us access to those fields. So we don't have access to those fields in the initialize, but we do have access to it here in the update function. So we hit show documentation. Now we have this properties object, and you can see we have properties.placeholder, we have properties.dataType, we have properties.list of options. That's what we need. So properties.list of options, and now we can see, so it says list of objects. List of objects, it's a list of things in Bubble. So we can see now we have another one. It says list of options is a list. It's an object as follows. So this means properties.list of options is not, we can't just say properties.list of options and that's our data. It's actually an object that we then need to use to pull the data out. So we have two options here. We have length, which is a function that'll give us a total number of items in that list. And then we have get, which takes two inputs. It takes the starting input and then the total number of items that we want to get. So if we say so the first one is going to be 0. That's going to be the first one in the list. And so if we want to get 10 objects, we would say start at 0 and get 10. Or we could say start at 10 and get 10, or whatever the scenario would be. And so that's how we're actually going to pull that data in as something that we can work with here in the plugin. So let's just go ahead and hide that, and we're going to walk through this. And the first thing, so let's just say let length equal, and we'll just say properties dot list of options, right? And then we had that length function, so we'll say length. All right. So that will give the length variable now will be a numeric value. It'll be a count of the number of options, or the number of the number of objects that are passed in that list of options. So now we're just going to say options, right? So options equals properties dot list of options, and now we're going to say you're going to use that get function. And we want to get them from the beginning because we're going to manage the list that we want in the drop down. We're going to manage that from Bubble side. And so this is anytime you can give the Bubble developer the ability to manage things easily from the Bubble side, then you want to, right? So with something like this, we don't want to build it into plugin. It's unnecessary to build this into the plugin and say, hey, just pass me a bunch of stuff and we're gonna, you know, try to manage what list and what options we're gonna put into the dropdown from the dropdown code or from the plugin code. If you're building a very specific plugin, it might make sense, like something very private, specific plugin for a specific purpose. But when you're building for people, there's kind of this line you want to walk. You want to cover all the bases as the coder, but you want to provide as much flexibility to the Bubble developer as you can. And so with this, you're going to wind up writing this particular code probably quite a bit, simply because most times with lists, you want to allow the developer to manage what is actually passed in through that list field entirely in Bubble if it's possible. So that's what we're going to do here. So we're going to start. Remember, the get takes two inputs. It takes the beginning, where you want to start retrieving objects, and then the total amount of objects you want to retrieve. So we're just going to add 0. We want to start from the first one, and then the total is going to be, we're going to use our length variable, and so that essentially says, length says how many options do we have, and then the next step we say, okay, give us all those options. All right, so let's just do that, and we're going to console log this just so that it's very easy to see what's happening. So I'm going to do two things. See, let's console log the options, and let's console log the actual length. Okay, so let's go and refresh our preview screen. We're going to go into the console. Okay, so we can see here, right? So the first thing we're logging here is the list of objects that we've brought in. So you can see it says 5, and now we can see there's 5 items here. And then we're just console logging the length variable as well, and that confirms, you know, the total amount here. But if we look here, you can see now there's still no data here. It's just still an object. So here we have two more functions. So the get function is how we retrieve an actual field value from this option, from this item. And then list properties will give us all the field names for that object. So we're going to just kind of stop here and look at what this looks like. So we don't need the length anymore. So let's just use the list properties. We'll say dot list. Oops, let me look at that. I'm trying to remember. So, and we can see it's specified here too, right? So this tells us how to get the actual list of options, and then this here would tell us how to get the actual values from those objects. So list properties, okay, no underscore. So let's just do list properties. All right, so we're going to refresh that, and we'll just look at what that looks like. Oh, I know what I did. I need to tell it, because this is a list of them. So let's just tell it to grab the first one. We only want to list the properties from a single object. We'll refresh. Okay, so now we can see these are the 6 fields that are on that character object. You can see we have display text. That's the only one that we added, right? And then these other 5 are the Bubble default fields. So created by, slug, created date, modified date, and ID. So then to get the actual value from that, we have to use this actual key that Bubble stores underlying of that field. So on the front end, if we look at the data type, we can see this says display, but here it's actually the key for that field is going to be display text. So we'll just copy that, and now we'll look at how this get works. So we'll get rid of list properties, and then we're going to say get, and then we're essentially telling Bubble, so options get the first option, and then we want to get the display text from that option. And we'll refresh. And now we can see there's Johnny Appleseed. He's the first option, and that's the display value that we want. We want to push that here into this dropdown. Okay, so we stopped there for a bit. Let's go ahead and start moving on. We're gonna have to extract that data, and then create a way of actually pushing it into the dropdown. So I just want to point out one more thing. So you obviously can't, be going in your console and copying the correct key. So that's why we actually put this field. So the display field, if we select this, and we're gonna, in fact, let's just log this out. So if we log console or properties dot, let me just remove this. We will just log properties dot display field. There we go. Perfect. So if we log this will actually log the key, the value that we need to get that field's actual value from the object. So we'll just refresh, and there you can see. So by allowing the user here in the front end to say, I want to use the display field, right? If we change that to creator and refresh, now you can see we've got created by. So that's why we've added this field, because it allows us to let the developer set the field they want to use as a display, and then we can access that value to pull that data. Okay, moving on. So let's just look at SlimSelect, and yeah, we're here already. So and I'm going to keep moving through. I'm not going to really go through how to look through libraries. Every library is different. Some of them are really easy to read, some of them are not. But you just kind of want to go through, and you got to kind of figure out, okay, how does this one work? What are we going to do with it? How does it? How do I have to interact with it, etc. And so in SlimSelect, essentially, what we have to do is we have to use this. We have to use this set data function to set the data on that dropdown, and they've got an excellent setup here showing you exactly what we need. So this is going to be bare minimum, right? So the bare minimum that we need is an object that has a text key and a value for that text key. So let's just copy this, and we're going to bring this over into our bubble editor or our plugin editor, and we'll make this look a little nicer. Okay, then this is going to be an array of objects, and this is what we need to create out of each of these options. So we know we're going to have to create an array, so let's just go ahead and we'll set a variable that is an array. We'll leave it empty for now, and but we know that this is what that needs to look like. So I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to grab our options variable. Remember that holds our list of objects. And then we're going to use the map function, which simply just goes through each one. It's gonna loop through each item in that options variable, and then for each one we're going to create one of these options. So let's just do this. In fact, do options array equals, And then so we'll just say X. X will be the value of the current item that we're working with. So we'll get some curly brackets, and then let's just say return. I think this will work. We'll just pass this like that, and then let's say return text equals X. All right. So let's actually we're going to console log the options array, and let's comment this out. We don't need that to run at this moment. And so let's just see if that, oh, sorry, that is not going to work. We're going to need x.get properties dot display field, because remember this is a list of objects, but not a list of data at this point. So we have to get that data. So X is going to be that object that has the get function on it, and then we're just telling it to use the properties.display field and pull that value. All right, so let's make sure we're back on display, and we're going to refresh. Okay, perfect. So let's look. All right, so now we have an array text Johnny Appleseed, text Robin Williams. So this looks exactly like this array of objects that we were after. So now let's see if we can see we haven't actually pushed anything in here. So let's see if we can set that data. We'll go ahead and uncomment this. So and you can see we've added the SlimSelect element to this select variable. So we're going to use that. So we're using select.setData. And you say this setData method can take an array of objects, and it will set the options of the original select, and it'll re-render the SlimSelect. Okay. So, but we've recreated this array as options array. All right. So that should, and we'll just talk back through it. We're getting the total number of items here with length. Options, we're getting all the options and putting it into this options variable. And then we're creating a blank array that we're going to use. And so then here we're taking this blank array and we're saying it's going to equal to, and then we're mapping through every option and creating this object and creating the array that we need to display the data in the dropdown. So this console log is just, we wanted to see it in the console to make sure we're creating it properly. Then this the select variable is just simply pulling in this SlimSelect element and giving us access to work with that. And then we can use the select.setData function, and we just had to pass this array that we're creating here, and that will the library will then take that, put it into the options on these dropdown. Okay, let's preview this. We cross our fingers, and we should have, yes, we have a list of options. We have a option already selected. We can select new options. All right, very cool. So our dropdown's working. Yay, that's fun. But the item that was selected is not, we don't want it just to select the first item in the list. We do have a default value field that will allow the user to set the value that should be selected. So let's just dive back here into SlimSelect again, and let's see what other values we have here. So let's see. All right, so the set method would take a value and update the original select as well as SlimSelect. Okay, so we can use this to actually set an initial value. So let's just copy that over, and then we probably should actually start making some notes here and say this is going to set the data in the dropdown. All right, and then here we'll say set the default value, and we're just going to pass that like that. All right, let's look back here. Need to kind of look through because this is passing the value. We haven't set any values yet. Excuse me. Okay, so that's not giving us much options there. Let's look in the options here and see how we can display. Okay, so now we're starting to see some other scenarios here where they're actually showing. So here we have, right, we're seeing that you can actually send a value in there, which we're going to probably need so that we have both a text, a visible text, but we also need a value that we can use, and we really need to be able. We're going to be able to do that because we're going to need access to the unique ID for the elements or for the options in order to be able to publish those back out. So let's just look here. So that's just a value and then another option. So let's go ahead and add that here. Let's go ahead and add that. And I'm just going to enter full screen so it's easier to work with. In here, let's just do we'll do a comma and then say value, and then we're just going to copy this actually, and I'm going to hard code this because I want to get the ID from this option. And this is going to pull the unique ID for that record. So I know that underscore ID is that field name. That's always the field name for the unique ID. So now we'll be creating, here, let's just refresh this. And we'll look in the console. Okay. Okay, so now we can see, right? So we've got both the display text and we have a unique ID for each item. It did not pre-select one for us, which must be happening just by adding those values. Okay, fantastic. So, and as you can see, look, it's building elements like this it's just trial and error. There's a lot you can learn and a lot you can get better at, where you're not dealing with a lot of the issues you will at the beginning. But there's always just kind of a trial and error and saying, okay, well, let's try this and see if it works. Let's try that and see if it works, until you eventually figure out exactly how it works and what you need to do. So right there, like, we figured out we need to add that value, and so let's actually see what we can do as far as setting the initial selection. Let's see. All right, I don't think, okay, so these are all options generally that we can add here inside when we're initializing the drop down. Let's go back into methods. Okay, set. Oh, we already copied this. That's right. So we have set value. So let's actually, what was the name of our initial value here? So we have default option. So properties.default, that's going to be how we access that. And so let's just set this here. So this value will be properties. Oops, what did I do? Properties.default. Okay, and then now check this out, right? So show documentation. Now we can see the default is an object as well, right? and this will give us actually, we actually have the list properties and get functions directly on this one. So you can see now here, list of options, get, and default are objects as follows, right? So we're going to use that same get function to get the unique ID for the initial selection. So we'll just go back to full screen here, and so properties.default.get, and then again we know underscore ID is the right value there. So it did not pre-select one that time. It actually should not pre-select one this time because we don't have anything set in the initial. Ooh, it did. Let's check that. Yeah, we don't have anything set here as a default option, so it should not have. Let's just refresh again. Okay, so it's setting the first one, but let's try this. So let's say we're just going to search for characters and grab a random item. So we should be setting a default. All right, so Pinocchio was Pinocchio. Okay, so maybe not so random as okay. All right, so we're not getting a random item, but we are setting a specific data. I'm just going to grab. I want to make sure we're setting something. Let's grab Robin Williams here. Obviously, this is right. Like you don't go get unique IDs and stuff to do your searches, but yeah, sometimes you do when you're in the middle of something like this. So okay, so it should set Robin Williams as the initial selection. Okay, perfect. So now we have it working. We're populating a list of options, and we're setting a default value on it. So let's, but it's still insisting on a default value being set, or an initial value being set. It's not allowing us to not set an initial value. So let's go back in here and let's see. Okay, this is all about setting. No, we don't need that. I think we need to go back into options, and I want to know all the options that can be set here. So let's see. Placeholder. Okay, placeholders consist of setting the placeholder option value. The only difference is it requires an empty option. Okay. Let's grab. Yeah, so this is set. I'm just going to copy this. Okay, so we have to add some kind of an empty placeholder option in there as well. Let's see how we can do that. All right. So now this is going to have to get set here. So this is being set here on the initialization. Dear. Oh my. Okay. I don't know why I worry about it. It doesn't really matter here. But okay. So placeholder text here. Let's just see what that does on the front end. All right, and let's take our default option away. Okay, it's still insisting on setting an initial selection. Let's see. Set empty option with data placeholder. Otherwise, data placeholder text. Otherwise, first option will be selected. Okay, they tell us exactly what has happened. How do we set that? How do we set that? So yeah, this is real time talking through this, right? All right. Let's try just adding. Try adding something to that array that we're setting the data type with. So set data. Actually, it would tell us here how to do that. All right. We are going to, let's just create this. So I'm going to try something. Let's just create a new variable here. Yeah, we'll call it placeholder, and this is going to be an object. So we're going to say text. In fact, I think we have a placeholder field up here. All right. We say properties dot placeholder, and then I just say a value needs to be data selected. That was over here in options. Oh, hold it. Here we go. Okay, if you want to set a placeholder, set the first object placeholder to true. So placeholder true text equals placeholder text. All right, perfect. That's what we needed right there. So let's pull this over here, and I'm just going to grab that, and then so text will be properties dot placeholder. And then we're going to add this to the beginning of our array. So we're going to use, see if I can remember how to do this. I think it's unshift. That will add, we have options array, which is our list of options, right? Unshift should add that to the beginning of that array. So let's see what happens. And let's go ahead and, okay, we do have a placeholder set. So let's refresh. Ah, did it work? Yeah, I think it worked. No, it didn't. We broke something. What's the debugger saying? Oh, option array. It's supposed to be options array. Okay, let's try this again. Damn it, I got so excited with that one. Okay, perfect. So we have, it says select a character, which is what we have as our placeholder, and then we have all our options, and we can select them. We cannot deselect. Let's see, I think there's an option here that allows us to set the ability to deselect, allow deselect. Yep, so let's just grab this, and this is where it gets kind of fun, right? So now we're gonna go through here, right? So this we can just add here to our initialization, and that should allow us to deselect as well. And then you can kind of just start playing with it. But hey, what's cool, what's not? All right. Okay, so it's not allowing us to deselect directly on it, but it's giving us this X. I don't really like that X. What do we have? Allow deselect option. This will allow you to deselect a value in the dropdown by simply clicking the option again. Okay, I think that's what we want. So I'm just going to copy that. I don't want that X. I think that X is ugly. So let's refresh. Okay, the X is gone. Select Johnny. All right, perfect. So it allows us to deselect now. All right, cool. That is that's fantastic. So I think we're at a good spot. It looks like we're about we're about an hour for this entire video at this point. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop out here. There's gonna be a part 3, I guess. We have our drop down working. We have we're able to select. We're able to add different options, set our default values, set our placeholders, and all that. But we'll come back in part 3, and we'll build out the ability to publish a selected state as a value that's accessible by the bubble developer. We'll set up that trigger event, and then we'll go through a bunch of just kind of testing and walking through how do you take your plugin element, put it through the paces, and make sure that that it's going to work in different scenarios, and that when you put it out for people to use, they will have an element they can trust that's not going to break their app and will work well for them. So, till next time, cheers, guys.